Sorry, everyone.
No, don't be. It's fantastic to meet you, and really appreciate you making time for us. Still
You
connected?
too. No, it's great to. Yeah, yeah. Can you hear me?
Yeah, we're good to
If
go.
I'm saying things and you can't hear me,
um,
your hand up or something.
Congratulations on the film and all of those MIF screenings. It's a wonderful tribute to your dad.
Thank you so much. It's lovely to have it out in the world and outside of my head in the edit room and Alex's head, Alec Morton, the editor. It's there's nothing like sharing, like having a laugh in a cinema with a whole lot of people. So I really enjoyed the screenings that I got to go to. Lots of fun.
Has the response been overwhelming? Because what I've been looking at online has been like it's been a massive response to this.
Yeah, it's been pretty beautiful, and I feel like there are a few things that I sort of like I've noticed just over this last little while that I sort of hadn't noticed before. One of them is that I think maybe this, and it might be my dad's work, but it might be the era of like the media at the time. But people, when they talk about watching Clark and Daw or Fred Dagg or the games or whatever, they tend to talk about who they watched it with,
Right.
and like there's such a lovely community thing of, "Oh, I watched that with my dad when I grew up," or I didn't know what they were talking about, but my parents were pissing themselves or whatever. And so that sort of, you get a little bit of that feeling, like if you're sitting in a cinema and there are people down here and there's a group of them and a bit comes on, you see them go, "Oh," this is the thing we laughed at that time. So that's been a lovely thing to watch, really, because I suppose in its original form that would have happened in lounge rooms, and here it gets to happen in a cinema. And so people have their favorite bits and and pick up on different things. So yeah, I've been really gratified by that, and also yeah, a little surprised by the that community feeling of we all were part of this together, which is a lovely thing.
Yeah, for a lot of people our generation, he was also our gateway to politics. Like we didn't know what they were talking about, but we just knew it was funny, when they were doing that little bit.
Yeah, yeah, that's it. And I think another thing I thought watching it recently was there is like a big part of, like, from the one thread that goes through from his early work as Fred Dagg, which I wasn't around for. I wasn't online for that bit yet. Um, all the way through to sort of the interviews that he did with Brian Dorr and the games and so on. One of the things that is always there is rhythm. Like you can just absolutely, like, there are things that you can pick up on and you can get even if you don't get it.
Mm-hmm.
And there are examples, like if you go online and look at the Clark and Daw YouTube page, it's full of people going, I'm from Finland and I don't know who Senator Collins is from 1989 or whatever. But this just made me laugh, or this happened, something similar to this just happened in, the island of blah blah where I live. So I think there are things that you can kind of get into because the humor works,
Mm-hmm.
and then you're off, and if you kind of start to pick up on the politics and the messages, then you kind of, yeah, it's your gateway drug.
Oh,
Yeah.
oh,
Well,
oh, yeah, go on, Ben.
I was going to say, but the thing about especially the kind of all of the Clark and Daw interviews was that it taught you to love being gaslit because it was so obviously a lie that he just committed to 100%, and it was and you just like, even that you knew that it was ridiculous, that it was, but he was so straight in delivering it and so sincere. It was amazing.
That's a beautiful way of putting it. He always loved, there was a person who said to him, it was a woman in a supermarket or something, and he always reported as one of his favorite bits of feedback about Clark and Dora, about those interviews. And it was, I love your interviews that you guys do on the telly. I watch them these days. I've watched them for years, but I watch them these days. I watch them with a straight face and then I laugh at the news. We, that's the gaslighting, isn't it?
Yeah.
Because you go, I'm decoding this, I'm decoding it, I'm decoding it, and then I watch real life and I'm like, I see what you're doing there. Yeah.
I mean, you kind of think, do they teach it in school? Like when you go and learn how to be like I don't know what they are, like a press agent or something like that for anyone. Like they must show those interviews and go, no, just deny, carry on, just, act like it's 100%. You're in control and you know exactly what's going on and everything's fine and the
Yeah.
other person is wrong.
Yeah. Well, interesting you should say that because he always said that, that I describe in the film how Clark and Dawes started in print and then went to radio and then went to Channel 9. Um, but he always said that the moment that it went to television was kind of a significant moment in a way because that was the moment where people, so if you picture it, it was kind of, 4 TV channels or whatever. um, 60 Minutes is a flagship show that people tune into and learn about the world and so on. And he said, so people had come to an understanding of the grammar of television that was a little more sophisticated than it had been before. And they knew that politicians had media training. They had a new haircut when they got elected. There was a time when we used to laugh because Dad and I figured out, Dad probably figured out, and I thought it was hilarious, but that they were taught not to point. And so they did this thing where they went like this, you know, and you just see everyone do it for like friggin' 2 years. And so they had this training and they had this, like, looked polished or whatever. And he said, and your audience is reading that, right? So the timing of that moment where they came on dressed as themselves and stripped it back to just the language and the ideas or whatever. Yeah, that was very much in being conscious of that sort of media moment, that exactly what you're saying, that training that the politicians were receiving. And as a result, I remember people when the games was on TV, people were asking, so who's the mole that you have inside the Olympic and things like that. But it wasn't, he always said, you could make games could have been about any institution, could have been about the ABC, could have been about, you know, I don't know, the police. Like it was more that it's picking up on all of those tricks that a system provides. The sort of the garnishing that we build around the people inside of the system, which is fun.
Well, since watching the games, I've never trusted that the 100-meter track is a 100-meter track.
I saw somebody sent me this morning on Instagram, an American friend of mine sent me, apparently I'll have to look it up, but I only saw it in passing, but apparently they are moving the venue of the swimming in the Olympics, or they're contemplating it because the pool's not wide enough.
Yeah.
So like those things are kind of, I mean, they're there for the taking, and it's fun that people spot that, I think.
They should
Yeah.
just get the council to put in an extra lane.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Most documentary filmmakers have to travel afar and do years of research, on their subjects, but you had this wealth of assets sort of at your disposal right from the start. But what was the biggest challenge for you just putting this together in general?
Yeah, the challenge was exactly the flip side of what you just said. So early on in the process, I spoke to Paul Horan, who's in the film, he's a history nerd and a comedy nerd and a Kiwi who knows about comedy, and he said to me, I said, I'm thinking of sort of doing this story and using, the family videos and using the conversations I recorded with Dad and that stuff, but also I do know a lot about his work, and I sort of thought maybe, we could do it in a, like, we wanted to do it as a feature, but there was so much stuff that you could probably have, there were several different ways you could do it. So I was sort of proposing this to Paul. I was saying, what do you think? And he said, I mean, whatever you do, you're going to have the opposite problem to most documentarians. You've got too much stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Like, you haven't done an interview, you've got too much stuff.
Yeah.
You've got, you've got like oceans of archival. But Dad didn't throw out an envelope, so there were like 100 boxes of hilarious stuff. Like, and some of the things that are on the edit room floor are like devastating because there are funny stories, there's interesting stuff in there that he learnt along the way. So he was dead right. It was a bit of a nightmare, um, trying to trying to basically, tell have what sort of in the end wanted it to feel like was you're sort of falling through his life a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
And you're gonna grab a few things on the way down that you haven't seen before, and you're gonna also see all the things you've seen before. And there's gonna be stuff there that you're like, where's that thing? And you'll have to go and Google it later because it's not in there. You'll have to go and watch the Senator Collins front fell off interview because it's not in the film. But that process of sort of presenting like a storyline that is light enough to not weigh down the material, that was so hard. That was really so hard. But and particularly because, yeah, we had so many things. So there was a bunch of there were some readings that people did. Brilliant performers kindly agreed to do, which they were readings of Dad's words, and that was from a document that Dad had been working on, and we found after he died, which was the document was called For Lorin and Lucia, which is my sister's name, and it was his whole life written out. So I knew that we had some stuff that nobody else had that sort of, to me, made it like a richer story. And my mum said, if you do it, I don't want it, we wouldn't want it to be a hagiography. We wouldn't want it to be, here's this genius who did hit after hit after hit after hit after hit, the end. We wanted it to, it's actually a more interesting story than that because of how he came to be the person he came to be and what decisions he made to get there and all of that. So it's a tribute because he was a pretty cool cat and a fun guy, but it's also, I wanted it to be a little deeper than that. So if you like try, yeah, good luck trying to do that with all material. So that was the biggest challenge. We knew it would be, and it really was.
One of the things that I think made it that much deeper than the average sort of documentary or biographical documentary is the fact that you put yourself in a lot of those interview situations, like the talking head situations, which gave it much more of an emotional sort of foundation. What was your intention putting yourself in there?
Well, that's lovely because I wasn't sure about that at all, but want I wanted there is something very joyful about 7 years after he's gone. Um, I get to hang out with his friends again,
Mm-hmm.
right? And the people that he worked with. And maybe the stories I already know. And maybe we're talking together about what's interesting about the story. Um, but having doing that together, it sort of needed to feel a little bit like a collaboration, I
Mm-hmm.
think, or it needed to feel um, like it was a moving, breathing thing as well. And yeah, so we toyed with a few ways of doing it, but in the end, I wore the same godforsaken jumper in every single thing because I sort of thought, I sort of would like to be, in some ways his daughter sitting at the kitchen table asking his mates some
Yeah,
questions, like have
100%.
that element of it. Even though, it did also, there was also an element of, like, I have a bit of a background in radio. So there was something, it felt a little sometimes like doing a radio interview
Mm.
with people where you would just say, hang on, what that thing you just said, can we go and do that? So it had that, but if I hadn't been part of it, and I didn't want to look like a journalist either. I
Yeah.
didn't want to, be the 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 kind of point.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, that was more what that was about. And it is funny because it sort of made it harder to edit in some ways.
Sure.
Um, and somebody said to me at the end of one of the screenings, how hard was it to edit you and your dad? Because you finish each other's sentences and talk over each other all the time. And I thought, yes, you noticed that. And there was a bit of that in this, but it sort of, that was, and so there was a risk that it,
Yeah.
it sort of looks a bit kind of clumsy, but
No.
I was wanted to do that in exchange for the kind of intimacy is a weird word, but the immediacy of it or
I
something.
feel like I connected with your dad because you were there. Like you disarmed your guests, and like you said, you're like a little girl at the kitchen table. Like they're telling stories
Yeah.
about your dad, and you're soaking it up, and that really, for me, was like the strength of the movie. Particularly like Anne Edmonds. Like I saw a side of her that I've never seen before. Like her character was off, and like the cloak was removed. It
Yeah.
was fantastic.
Oh, that's great. Yeah, I loved that I got to um like that I that she was that we were able to sort of bring some people who wouldn't necessarily be associated with him, like Ernie Dingo's another one. Ernie Dingo's in the doco. He's in it for 5 seconds, and I interviewed him for 3.5 hours, and I reckon from the cutting room floor, you could make a 7-part series about Ernie Dingo. He's fascinating. Um, but but being able to talk to people like that who I don't know them that well. I don't know. Those are two examples of people I don't know terribly well, about the sort of moments where they intersected, which the Ernie Dingo was when he was quite young. He turned up at the Melbourne Comedy Festival. It was the first ever Melbourne Comedy Festival, or the second, or one of those ones. And Dad was running a thing called Humorists Read Humorists, where he was encouraging funny people to like bring to the stage something that you think is funny and perform it, or read it. And Ernie Dingo turned up and he read The Diary of a Settler, complaining about the natives as comedy. And apparently it was A, hilarious, and B, gut wrenching and kind of brilliant, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so that's not the only time their timelines intersected, but I just thought people like that being able to sort of, like you said, show a different side of them, or like invite them into the story in a way that kind of maybe shows connections that other people might not know are there, because there are a lot of people who are often called upon to talk about Dad, and they'll be the same people
Mm-hmm.
because that makes sense,
Yeah.
So this was a little, I really did want to kind of spread like say, here's an artistic creative community, and look at the way that the interplay between all of them.
For sure.
Did you discover that there was a difference between work dad and home dad in talking to all of these people that you perhaps didn't know that well?
No, I didn't, because I used to sit in Dad's office and would, sometimes people would tell a story when I was interviewing them, and I'd think, oh, I know, because I was on the other end. I was sitting at the desk next to you, and you were having that conversation. So I sort of, like we never worked together creatively, except that we did table reads at our house of each other's scripts, and we, talked all the time about our work. Like I really did a sort of an accidental apprenticeship with him. Um, but so it wasn't so much that, but what I loved and loved discovering, and you touched on it earlier with the people saying, "Oh yeah, your dad," Anne Edmonds, for instance, she says, "Yeah," and that's when I thought about asking your dad or something. And there's something about, like, I know all those stories,
Yeah.
but being welcomed into it yourself, it's a kind of beautiful, like, the cliches about catharsis and creativity and so on are well established, but there is something really beautiful about finding yourself in the middle of being invited into the story again. Particularly with the New Zealand stuff. When I went to New Zealand, I found myself moved quite often because I'd be, I, I hadn't been in that part of the timeline. I hadn't, my character hadn't arrived yet. So here I was being invited in, and it was, there was a sort of, there wasn't anything surprising, but what surprised me was how lovely it was to have those conversations 7 years on. And I think if we'd had them earlier, they would have been sad conversations, but
Yeah.
there was that, but that wasn't the main thing. The main thing was joy,
Yeah, amazing. We've just about run out of time. Before we chuff off, I want to just touch upon one thing that was not included in the documentary, but being fanboys that we are, and you can see it's behind Ben, Foot Rot Flats wasn't mentioned in the film. That was an entry point for our generation, and it's the one thing I think that your dad, that crossed the divide, because he was a cult icon in both countries, but that's the one thing that both countries really connected with. Is there a reason that wasn't in there?
Main reason is space. Second reason is there's a lot of, he half did it. It was a Kiwi project where he was already in Australia
Yep.
for some of it. Then for some of it he wasn't, and then they sort of shipped him over, and so there was, it would have, the telling of the story was right in the middle of a bit that needed to be clean.
Mm-hmm.
And it is one of those things where people do associate him with it. Um, and but it's also, there are a couple of things that we left out or that are hardly in it at all, which the reason we went through and we had the timeline written out, and eventually you had to go, right, well, that happened, and that happened, but what point is each of those making?
Yeah,
And if there wasn't a really clear different point, storytelling wise, you kind of go, well, people can go and watch that online, or people can, look into
for sure.
but so it was more a storytelling decision than anything else.
You should have
I
just
am.
blamed
I'm.
Dave Dobbin. That's what I reckon.
Yeah. Yeah. You couldn't get the rights. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah,
Dave Dob.
yeah.
I am curious.
Couldn't-
Just before we have to go, how long was the assembly cut?
Oh, define assembly cut. I mean,
13-part series
we,
on the ABC.
oh my God. We had it, we had so many. It was way too long, way too late in the process. So I feel like there was just a suspended period of months of just the editor and me locked in a room, and like 57 people on the door going, and us going, we're nearly there, we're nearly there, we're nearly there. And and just having to, but it was way too long. And several times we said this could be a 10-part series.
Yeah.
But that is the creative process. Like, I love that part. That bit where it gets really bloated and you go, I can't see how to get us out of this, but I know we'll get there. And you'll lose some darlings. There is a lot that I that still somewhere, but that's the joy of making something. And to me, that was the part where that's another part I was kind of surprised by, was like, oh yeah, that's right. This is a creative process and this is what I love doing. And I don't know, you never know. You can never imagine what John Clarke would think or say about something exactly. You can think, I can imagine he'd have something funny here, but he was so good at getting to the nub in a surprising way that sometimes you can't see that coming. But I do have a sense of his sort of sensibility a little bit, and I was in consultation with my family, and so that being able to sort of trust, particularly the first time I've directed a feature before, so you kind of, but you think, no, but I know it's going to happen. But I reminded myself of Dad and Ross, who wrote the games together.
I listen to him every morning.
Gorgeous. He is their production company. You may know this then, Glenn. Their production company is named after the expression that my mother heard a lot when she would walk through the kitchen at our place and see them hissing themselves with laughter. And it was, hour 8 of them doing so. And she'd say, how's it going? How's it going, guys? And they would say, yeah, good. Yeah, we're nearly there. We're putting on the finishing touches. And Finishing Touches is the name of their production company.
It's great.
They will touch it.
You paused at the end there, but this is a perfect
Oh,
opportunity.
you've paused too now.
Oh no. Thanks for making time for us, Lorin. It's a beautiful, beautiful testament and tribute to your dad. We loved it.
You guys, thank you so much. It's very nice to talk to you both. Sorry about my internet.